Right, I'm Caleb Jackson Jr., born in Harrisburg in 1930, where my father had a barber shop on Aberdeen Street. And growing up in Harrisburg, my grandfather, who was named Henry Jackson, had been a great baseball fan of the 1920s. In fact, coming from Milledgeville, Georgia, I think he either played or watched baseball in the South. And when the Negro Leagues were in the 1930s and early 40s, when the games came to Harrisburg through promotions by Bud Marshall, my grandfather would take me to see these games, and we really enjoyed it. It was a great outing for us. We probably saw at least 2 games a week from May through September, and it was just an enjoyable time. The 1930s are known as the Great Depression, but for us, it really wasn't a depression. It was a happy time. It was everybody had good feelings, and we really enjoyed watching baseball.
My name is Ted Knorr, and I'm a baseball fan. I don't consider myself a historian. I learn more than I give out, that's for sure. And I do focus on the Negro Leagues, and probably for 30 years now. And I'm very proud of the fact that I started a conference on Negro League baseball nationwide that is here now for 20 years. And we've had it in Harrisburg 4 times. I particularly champion one of the people we're going to meet in the picture is a guy named Graig Dixon. And I'll talk about him when we get there. The first one depicts Willie Foster, and of course that name will ring a bell. Willie was the brother of Rube Foster, who was the first commissioner of the Negro Leagues. In February of 1920, Rube and 7 or 8 other gentlemen formed the Negro National League, and we consider that the birth of the Negro Leagues. But Willie was a pretty good pitcher in his own right, the best left-handed pitcher in the Negro Leagues, and he's depicted in a Cuban national team uniform from the 28-29 Winter League season. He didn't have a very good year in Cuba. He lost more than he won, but the picture, what it really does, and this is what Graig Kreindler does, he highlights uniforms with detail, to the nth degree. So he has that 28-29 uniform of Willie Foster's detailed as accurately as possible. Pretty tough to do, takes a lot of research because all the pictures are black and white, the few pictures that exist. The next picture, one of my favorite subjects in baseball is outfields because Harrisburg had a great one. But it depicts the 1935 Pittsburgh Crawfords, and now this is a Phil Dewey work. But that outfield has Sam Bankhead in left field, and Bankhead is probably most memorable. He was the man that August Wilson modeled his character in the play Fences after. The center fielder is Cool Papa Bell. You can't get much better center fielder than that. And the right fielder is a gentleman named Jimmy Crutchfield. So this outfield was the Crawfords outfield in 35, and it was one of the key parts of the Crawfords, particularly from the defensive side, and they end up winning the Negro National League title that year. That's Josh Gibson, the greatest catcher, the greatest right-handed hitter in the Negro Leagues, the greatest power hitter outside of Babe Ruth in any league. Kreindler depicts him also in a 1935 Pittsburgh Crawfords uniform. Next up is Hank Aaron, and of course this is modern day. Now he played on the Indianapolis Clowns in, I believe, 1953, and that's what brings him into a Negro League show. But he's depicted by Phil Dewey, and you'll notice here, this frame is 2 baseball bats, a couple baseballs at the bottom, and I understand you had some kids in here recently, and they really loved this one because of the frame. My favorite outfield is, one of the players is depicted in the next picture, which is Phil Dewey's rat playing for a team called the Philadelphia Royal Giants in 1928 in California in the Winter League. But they also wore uniforms because, that's an expensive piece of property that these teams couldn't afford. So they were wearing Hilldale Giant uniforms because the catcher of the team was Biz Mackey, who played for Hilldale. Phil Dewey hit a home run, in my opinion, because he was able to change Hilldale to Harrisburg, and you see the result here. It's marvelous. So this is a work of art. And let's talk a little bit about the outfield of Harrisburg from 1924 to 1927, because it's the best outfield of the Negro Leagues. And that's not me. The Hall of Fame says so, because it's the only outfield of the dozen best outfields, according to the Hall. What I like about the Dewey picture, it depicts him as a Newark Eagle and as a Cleveland Indian. So it captures the integration story. Larry Dewey was a Newark Eagle on July 1st, 1947, and he debuts with Cleveland a week later. So the picture here is kind of marvelous because it sort of captures that. The next one is my Pittsburgh friend, he's the only of the artists that I don't know, Paul Kuhrman. And it depicts the three women who played for the Indianapolis Clowns in 1953 through 55. And it's entitled The Three Graces of Indianapolis. This is a sort of a tribute to Raphael, who did the picture of the Three Graces way back in, I don't know when, but the Renaissance era, I think. So Paul Kuhrman sort of tips his cap to Raphael. At the same time, he's showing Mamie Johnson, Toni Stone, and Connie Morgan, three women who played in the Negro Leagues in the 50s. Mamie, to link it to Harrisburg a little bit, she played for Oscar Charleston in 1954. He was the Clowns manager. They won the Negro League that year, and unfortunately, Oscar didn't get to celebrate much. He passed away in October of 1954.
Again, I'm going to talk about the games that I saw in the late 30s and early 40s with my grandfather. Now, most of the games on the island were to be the Pittsburgh Crawfords, Homestead Grays, Baltimore Eli Giants, Newark Eagles, Philadelphia Stars, who were pretty close to Harrisburg, most of those teams. And they were the ones that basically rotated around on the island. Now, during the late 1930s, Pennsylvania had what was called the Pennsylvania Blue Laws. I don't know if you have heard of the Pennsylvania Blue Laws, but they applied to baseball, especially on Sunday. Baseball, you couldn't start a game until 2 o'clock, and you couldn't start an inning after 6 o'clock, 6:15 in the evening. So Sundays was the day for doubleheaders most of the time, and the games would start at 2. The first game would usually go pretty well, but the second games, if a team got behind, they would try to start. If you couldn't get 4.5 innings in, or 5 innings, you didn't have a game. So if a team was behind, sometimes they would stall to make sure that the time would go past 6:15. Then you couldn't start another inning, and the game just wouldn't count. Because these teams were in the league, and the games played in Harrisburg actually were league games. Eastern Colored League. So I really enjoyed it on Sundays now. I remember in particular one game between the Newark Eagles and Leon Day was pitching. And Leon Day is in the Hall of Fame. He was a great pitcher. I think Dewey might have been on the team at that time before he went into the Army, and probably Irving. But they were playing the Philadelphia Stars, and the Philadelphia Stars were my favorite team because they had a player by the name of Jim West, who was, in my estimation, probably the greatest fielding first baseman I ever saw. So we enjoyed that. Now, 1943 is a particular good year because that's the year Harrisburg had a team. It was called the Harrisburg St. Louis Stars, but they really only played in Harrisburg. And my grandfather thought this was like a team. As I mentioned before, the other teams playing on the island were out of, like Philadelphia would be playing Pittsburgh. Baltimore's playing Newark. But here we have a team, a Harrisburg team now that's going to be playing Baltimore and playing Pittsburgh and playing Newark. So he thought about the old Harrisburg Giants in the 1920s because he had seen Oscar Charleston and all those teams play, like Rap Dixon. He saw those teams play in the 20s. And we saw this as maybe a comeback for Harrisburg. They also had a team at New Cumberland, the New Cumberland Army Depot. Had a team of basically major and minor league players. And they played the Negro League teams, they played teams in the area, they occasionally would play a major league team in an exhibition. And I think New Cumberland had a streak of over 20-some consecutive games that they won. Things were going well until about late May or June. And suddenly, the Harrisburg Stars stopped playing. And we wondered why, wondered what happened, because I was following the team, following the games. And we found out that Hannes Wagner took a leave from Pittsburgh and organized an all-star team. And he had Dizzy Dean on his all-star team and some other players. Now, Dizzy had stopped playing now, but he would occasionally come in and pitch or just promote the team. So the Hannes Wagner All-Stars and the Harrisburg Stars went on a tour around the country to raise money for the war effort. And they had I've probably heard of the campaigns. They had bond campaigns. They had like the first campaign for basically selling bonds, and they'd have a second campaign a few months later and so forth. But the idea was, if you get a good Negro League team playing an all-star white team, then you're going to draw people out to see it. And the first game that they played was on the island. And I saw Hannes Wagner's team. Dizzy Dean was supposed to pitch, but he didn't. But I did see them play against the Harrisburg Stars. And the Harrisburg Stars won that game. They beat the Hannes Wagner's All-Stars. And the Harrisburg paper did carry the games. Now, the next game may have been played in an exhibition, say, in St. Louis or Indianapolis. They traveled around the country. But the Harrisburg papers would publish the results of those games. And it was just an exciting time for us. I was talking earlier about growing up watching baseball. Well, later in life, after I retired from the post office in 1989, I started thinking about the things that I experienced growing up. And I started looking at old baseball games, started reading newspapers, and then I started reading about the Cuban Giants, who had played in the 1887, and that Harrisburg had 2 players on the Cuban Giants. And I just put a question out there. Does anybody anywhere know anything about the Cuban Giants? And Ted Knorr, who lived in Lancaster then, answered the question. And that's how we met. And of course, you were living in Lancaster, but you commuted every day to Harrisburg.
That's right.
So then we had lunch, and he started talking, and he was a member of the Society of Baseball Researchers, and one thing led to another, and there we go. And eventually we met everybody in baseball. Just, it just starts off, and you meet them, or you're on the internet with them, or Facebook, and I remember Peterson. Peterson was one that really, I think, opened the book, Only the Ball Was White. There were other things that opened it up, but Peterson's book, when he published Only the Ball Was White, then a lot of people started looking at the old Negro Leagues.
Bob Peterson, in 1998, when we had the first conference here in Harrisburg, he was our keynote speaker. So he got to meet Caleb face-to-face and me face-to-face.
And actually, he was from Wayne County, and he said that around 1938, he went to a county fair, and he saw a Negro League team, and believe it or not, he said it was the Harrisburg Giants. They were playing an exhibition game at this county fair. And then years later, he thought about that and started going back doing research, and one thing led to another, and there comes the book. So Harrisburg has a lot going on here.
Caleb, now you saw baseball back in the 30s and 40s, Major League, Negro League
I
Baseball.
can remember some specific games.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you about a specific
All right,
one
okay.
that you've told me about.
All right.
August 26, 1940. You're only 10 years old. I think it's a doubleheader, and
Yeah.
Jesse Owens is the big attraction.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Jesse Owens, the advertiser, Bud Marsh was the great promoter at the drugstore, and he promotes this thing. Jesse Owens is going to race a motorcycle. So that is an attraction. Because Jesse Owens, of course, everybody knows Jesse Owens won all these events in the Olympics in 36. And of course, 1940, they didn't have Olympics. So that brought the crowd out. So we went out to see this Jesse Owens race the motorcycle. And the event happened before the regular game. And as I went back and read about it, they invited a lot of the track stars in the area to come out. And I didn't realize this, that Earl Flickinger was the starter.
Wow.
Have you ever heard of Earl Flickinger or not?
Sure.
Earl Flickinger was one of the first to get involved in track and field for women in the AAU. He was the starter. And of course, they were going to race, I think, 100 yards. They marked it off. And of course, Earl Flickinger has the gun, puts the gun up, and take your mark, get set. Of course, he fires the gun, and of course, away goes Owens. But the motorcycle, once the motorcycle gets warmed up, it's no contest. But it did draw the people out, and there's something that you would remember. You see that, you remember. And also, you remember, look, my grandfather was telling me that Oscar Charleston was managing the other team, the team that played. And he remembered Charleston.
Yep.
Now, you asked me, did I get to see, I saw Jesse Owens and Charleston. I didn't get to meet them. But my grandfather immediately recognized Charleston. And also, Charleston was introduced, the announcer introduced, this is the great Oscar Charleston that played here in the 1920s and so forth.
And I think Charleston played that day.
I think he did get in the game.
Yeah, and I think he might have got a hit, you told me.
Right. And there's a lot of you may know Charleston married a Harrisburg school teacher. That's another story, which we know well, because we helped Beer write the book. Okay.
But I think in Charleston getting a hit, that's the last hit you feel you ever got.
Yeah, he talked about might be even the last hit that Charleston got. That's quite possible.
Yeah.
Quite possible.
Okay, now we're going to repeat this one. Who was your favorite player growing up as a Negro?
Oh, I mentioned that before, Jim West. He was called Shifty because mainly because of his mannerism. He looked like Sinbad. I had said this before before he came in. He looked like Sinbad, the comedian, and he had a stutter walk, and they looked like he might have had Parkinson's or something. But he was just a great fielder.
Yeah.
He was
known for his glove, but you saw him hit 2 big home runs.
Right, and he could also hit. Yes. In fact, he hit a home run off of Leon Day.
Wow. Leon Day, a Hall of Famer.
He's Hall of Famer. Yes. And it was a long home run. But speaking of home runs, my grandfather says he saw Charleston hit the ball that cleared the trees on the island. And off the same trees that were there, and probably the same ones that were there in the 40s, aren't the same ones that are there now. But he claims he saw Charleston hit probably the longest home run ever hit on the island. It was to clear the trees in center field. And I don't think it went into the river. Now, so that's, people add a little, add a little yeast to the story, I don't think it went into the river, but it was a long hit.
Okay. Ted Radcliffe, a great catcher and pitcher.
Ted Radcliffe was for whatever reason, me and my grandfather, we seemed to like to watch catchers and pitchers more than, like I said, we sat on the first base side, And the pitchers, the catchers, and the first baseman, they were the ones we watched mostly. And Radcliffe was something like Campanella. He was just a fiery player. And he had the nickname Double Duty Radcliffe, because he once had pitched one game in a doubleheader and caught the other game. And somebody said there were only 7-inning games. Well, I'm not sure about that, but he at least did that. Well, the particular game I remember, now, when the games were on the island, a lot of times the officials were local officials. And one in particular was Art Fields, who I think you know about. He was actually a Negro League umpire that we had some incidents. And Art Fields was the umpire. So late in the game, they start to run out of baseballs. They start to run out of baseballs. So Radcliffe calls timeout, and he complains to the umpire, said, "We need another ball in here." He says, the ball is beat up. You know, you could tell his mannerism, the ball is beat up. And Art Fields, the umpire, says, "No, the ball's okay." So they decided to play, go ahead. The next pitch, Radcliffe hits the ball all the way to the base of the center field wall. And he turns around, bat in hand, to Art Fields and says, "Well, see, I told you, if you'd have changed baseballs, I would have had a home run." And he acted like he drew back like he was going to hit Art Fields, which he didn't, but it was a memorable moment. And I still think if they'd have put a new ball in, he possibly would have had a home run. And he would have won the game. The game was that close. But it was an incident that I remember as a youngster.
Okay. Now, August 23rd, 1944, Caleb's then 14, you saw Newcomb and Campanella playing the same game. Can you...
You know, we talked. I was surprised that Newcomb wasn't in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Somehow I thought he was in, but he wasn't. And of course, you know, they both later played for the Dodgers. Well, they played against each other on the island. Newcomb, of course, is the pitcher, and Campanella is the great catcher. And if you ever saw Campanella play, if you're on the base, any base, you be careful, because he was famous for throwing out people off of first base and third base, and sometimes even try second. But he was just famous for that. He's a strong arm. But I saw that game, and it was a memorable game. And I was surprised later that I remember when they went to Brooklyn, of course, and Brooklyn became my grandfather's favorite team. And of course, I was always a Yankee fan. Now, I saw Yankees play in around 1940, and Atlee Donald was pitching one game, and Red Ruffing was pitching the other. I don't know if you've heard those names. I was just shocked the other day. Andy Linker goes on Facebook, and he talks about Bob Feller threw a pitch 98 miles an hour, and he broke Atlee Donald's record. I didn't realize that Atlee Donald had the record for pitching. I didn't realize Atlee Donald was that fast. But anyway, that's just a side story. But anyway, I did see the Yankees play in Yankee Stadium with DiMaggio. Gehrig was gone then, but DiMaggio, in fact, the great outfield was Keller, DiMaggio, and Hendrick. You know, so I could compare those guys to what I saw here on the island, and I was impressed with the island players as much as those players.
One last question now. Most people will associate Jackie crossing the color line as being a great big event, but you remember another event by a pitcher, major league pitcher named Dan Bankhead, but he wasn't pitching when Caleb...
Bankhead, now one of the things, when Robinson went to Brooklyn, the local radio station started to carry the Dodgers games. Before that, all we had was Byron Salm with the Phillies and the Athletics. And you remember Byron Salm? Well, anyway, but they started broadcasting because the Dodgers games were exciting, very exciting. And I had remembered seeing, now there were 3 Bankheads, and about 2 weeks before Dan Bankhead went to the major leagues, the 3 brothers played on the island. 2 were on one team. They went to Cincinnati.
Not sure.
Anyway, 2 were on one team, one on the other. And the 3 brothers. One was a pitcher, one was a second baseman, one was an outfielder. Well, Dan Bankhead was called up late in August of 47. And he goes in, I think, against Pittsburgh. He's a relief pitcher. And he finally gets somebody out. But then he comes to bat. We didn't have designated hitter. He comes to bat, and his first Negro pitcher in Major League Baseball, he hits a home run. And this was exciting. Nobody expected it. I mean, we were listening to the radio, and you just didn't expect Bankhead to hit a home run, what he did. And that was as exciting as Robinson.
And did you say people poured out of the
People
houses?
pouring out in the streets, yes. Yes, I can recall people pouring out in the streets in the neighborhoods and talking about Bankhead hitting a home run. And everybody thought, well, he's going to be the greatest star of all times and this and that. And I think he finished the season. He never became much of anything. He was a decent player, but I don't think he lasted long in the major leagues after that. But everybody just thought it was just so phenomenal that he hit this home run as a pitcher, first African-American pitcher, and hit a home run his first at bat. So that's memorable.
I don't have any more questions for Caleb, but
any other?
Two points I want to say about Caleb. My friend here is 90 years old, yet you'll notice when he introduced himself, and he always does it this way. My wife gets mad at me when I call him Junior, but he's Caleb Jackson Jr., so I just find that so touching. And the other thing is, the last baseball game I asked him about, he was only 14. Well, a few years later, and this is what made the Jesse Owens story so touching, Caleb is a sprinter himself. He's a 100-yard dash man.
Yes, I ran for William Penn High School.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention those 2 things. Caleb Jackson Jr.
William Penn, class of 48, the only class that beat John Harris 3 years in a row in football. And we are so proud of that. Any questions? Yes, you have something.
Did you talk about your contribution to getting the Negro League players into the Hall of Fame? The committees you were on?
Especially
Well,
you, yes.
in general.
Well, we all helped a little bit, but you were.
Between 2000 and 2006, SABRE, their
Yes.
Negro League committee, was awarded a $250,000 grant to research old baseball games, something Caleb and I do. Back in those days, it was microfiche. It's a lot easier now on computer. But yes, that study that I was one of 40 that played a pretty big role in it, resulted in 17 Negro Leaguers being put into the Hall in 2006. And I went up to Cooperstown to attend that. I won't go back for an induction day until Rap Dixon goes in. Then I'll be there with bells on. But yes, Caleb and I both played a role in
Yes.
getting those players in. And the statistics can be found at seamheads.com. And it's a beautiful setting. Probably 75% of all Negro League baseball games are now captured on Seamheads. The statistics are captured on seamheads.com.
One of the advantages I had being in Harrisburg and working with SABRE, anybody that wanted a box score from a game played in Pennsylvania, they would contact me, and I would go to the state library, and I have all the librarians down there are my friends, and we could find almost anything. For instance, Phil Dixon was writing about the 1903 Philadelphia Giants, and we found that they played the World Series game in Harrisburg. And Rube Foster pitched in Harris. He pitched a one-hitter on the island in 1903. They had the World Series, these African American World Series. They actually played in different cities, and I think it was the sixth game of the series was played here. And one of the reasons it was played here is because Clarence Williams, the great catcher, was from Harrisburg, and Harrisburg was known as a baseball city, and they played the game here. So Rube Foster pitched several times in Harrisburg. He's the one that's given credit for establishing the Negro Leagues in 1920. So it's called pre-Negro League history. But Harrisburg, with the Cuban Giants, with the York Monarchs of 1889, the 1900 teams and so forth, we were able to do a lot of research at the State Library on them. And I think when I received that award from SABRE for outstanding research, I really thank the librarians at the State Library who helped me find so much information. But every newspaper in Pennsylvania, they have a microfilm. It's not digitized yet. They're slowly starting to digitize. Newspapers.com I use a lot now. It's digitized. 10, 15 years ago, you had to go into the library and pull the microfiche and pull the film and search through the games, search through, and it was a great experience, though. Wonderful experience.